Well, for more on Vladimir Putin's return, I'm joined now by F. William Engdahl, author of A Century of War, Anglo-American Oil Politics and the New World Order. Well, NATO and the US often accuse Russia of a lack of democratic reforms. Do you think with Vladimir Putin back in the Kremlin as president that rhetoric will increase?
I think the rhetoric definitely will increase, but for NATO or Washington to accuse Russia of a lack of democratic reforms is a bit like the pot calling the kettle black. The kind of measures that have been passed recently by the U.S. Congress and signed by President Obama, essentially tearing up the Constitutional Bill of Rights, is not exactly what I consider going in the direction of democracy in the United States. So I think this is a red herring that's being used to try to paint Russia as a pariah, but the context of it is that NATO policy and Washington policy from the Pentagon and the White House over the last 3 administrations has been to encircle Russia with NATO member countries with ballistic missile, I call it offense because it really isn't defensive, it's offensive. These missile installations in Poland, in the Czech Republic, in Romania, in Turkey, that is not at all aimed at Iran. That is directly aimed at the heart of Russia's military security. And little wonder that the Russian General Staff is a bit uneasy about what NATO's real intentions are toward Russia.
Well, what about in general, though, Russia's attitude towards the West? Dmitry Medvedev is usually thought of by the West as the softer face of Russia's foreign policy. But what's now on the cards for Moscow and Washington now that he's Prime Minister and obviously concerned with domestic issues rather than foreign policy, which Putin is now involved in?
Well, I think the return of Putin to the presidency heralds a strong, not a decisive shift, but a strong shift in emphasis away from the failed reset policy that Hillary Clinton offered when Medvedev first came in as president. And I think it's been clear that the reset has brought nothing positive for security or stability in Russia. It was a time-buying measure on the part of Washington simply to allow it to build more of its ballistic missile defense installations and put more pressure on Russia's security situation.
What about China? Of course, on course to economically outrun the US in the coming years. Do you think Washington will be watching closely how Russia deals with China? How do you think Putin will develop relations with the East?
Well, first of all, I think Russia and China have no choice but to deepen their relationships on a strategic basis economically, with projects such as what the Chinese refer to as the Eurasian high-speed rail land bridge projects, a network of rail infrastructure throughout greater Russia and throughout Eurasia, from China onto markets in Western Europe and the Middle East. And I think that is really a key point, the Eurasian focus of Putin, a key point for reviving the interior of Russia's economies from places such as Omsk, from Siberia, and other areas that have been, through the collapse of the Soviet Union, in sad neglect economically, and bringing more vitality as the trade between Russia and China and countries in between, the so-called stands, increases greatly over the next years with high-speed metallurgy technologies, iron ore technologies, and so forth. Russia could play a leading role under a Putin presidency and a Medvedev prime ministership in building this high-speed infrastructure.
William, just finally, just days before Vladimir Putin's inauguration, there were some violent protests here in Moscow against his return. Do you expect this backlash to continue? And does that actually suggest Russian society is becoming more open? And with, of course, Medvedev concentrating on domestic policies, how do you see the political scene and the opposition developing?
Well, the opposition is really a motley crew, as you pointed out in the previous presentation. The leading figures of the opposition talking about corruption are really people whose own track record and their own links to the National Endowment for Democracy and various Washington-steered NGOs is not exactly transparent in and of itself. So I think the opposition is being stirred up by Washington to try to paint Putin in the worst possible light and try to create as much domestic unrest as they can for a Putin presidency, because they do not want stability in Russia. And I think that's rather unfortunate for world stability.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for your thoughts. F. William Engdahl joining us live there in Frankfurt in Germany. Thank you.